It's where people turn when they're desperate for help, but we're learning that emergency calls to 911 are sometimes put on hold.
WDRB's Jalen Level investigates why and reveals the one thing you should not do if it happens to you.
When you call 911, you expect an immediate response.
Run to the hallway, and I see flames coming out of the floor.
Anxiety skyrocketing.
I scream at my son, get outside.
Leslie Spillman made a desperate call for help when her house caught on fire.
Well, 911 put me on hold.
A terrifying situation, suddenly even scarier.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to lose my home, everything I own. And then when 911 didn't answer, that panic just tripled.
Not enough dispatchers to answer every call immediately. She was placed in a queue.
You have reached 911. Please do not hang up.
In shock, distraught, and getting no answer, she hung up and sent her son to the nearest fire station a mile away for help.
I just pulled up to the fire department, and I think they're coming now. The house on fire.
WDRB acquired call logs that show Spillman waited on hold with 911 for 2 minutes and 21 seconds before she hung up. What she didn't know was help was already on the way because a neighbor's 911 call got through.
Okay, neighbors behind us have an alarm going off, and they're screaming, get out of the house, we need help. So I don't know if there's a fire or what's happening.
We're short-staffed. It's a nationwide problem, and we're trying to, actively recruit people in.
Metro Emergency Services says it's 25% short-staffed on several positions.
We offer voluntary overtime for people to come in at different times on their off days to be able to help us on that short staffing.
When a significant emergency happens and several people call at once to report it, dispatchers can get overwhelmed.
This is the message to people when they call 911, expect to enter this queue.
It just depends on the time of day. It depends on the other situations that are going on. There's a possibility that they could be put in that queue, but not an expectation.
So what should you do when an emergency happens and you can't get through right away?
The solution is for people to be patient once they get into that queue and not hang up. I could put 50 call takers in there, but if 51 people call 911, one person's going to be put into that queue.
The department says remain on hold so you can get to the front of the line as quickly as possible.
What's the length that people are in this queue?
It could be a couple seconds to, potentially, a minute or so, or a couple minutes.
WDRB filed open records requests to dig into the volume of 911 calls made in Jefferson County. Records show from January 1st through July 23rd, 2022, the department answered more than 300,000 calls. During that same time frame this year, there have been more than 400,000 911 calls. That's a 12% increase. We asked Emergency Services how many of those were placed on hold, but they declined to answer.
I did make that mistake and hang up because I thought I did something wrong.
Even though Leslie Spillman hung up on 911, it had a record of her call and called her back, which is a standard practice, acknowledging that it might be tough for someone to hang on the line in the midst of an emergency.
I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's just where, you've got to realize that we're going to get to your call.
The National Emergency Number Association surveyed 850 workers from 911 call centers across the country. It found their primary issue is understaffing, which leads to burnout. 38% felt they were not well prepared to handle active shooter calls, and roughly 78% said the high stress nature of the job was the major factor in staffing.
You have reached 911. Please.
All problems that surfaced on one of Louisville's darkest days. Mass shooter opened fire inside Old National Bank.
333 State Old National Bank. Another caller advising something 8 to 9 people have been shot.
Understaffed and overwhelmed by the calls, several people were placed on hold.
We're short-staffed. When we get to full staff, we've got funding to hire additional 911 call takers, but we can't add them because we can't fill the positions that we've got now.
Spillman's home was severely damaged in the fire, so for now, a hotel is home while she waits on renovations. She hopes what happened to her won't happen again.
I know 911 operators are special people, but let's recruit some people.
A sentiment shared by those in charge.
I would say this, we're hiring. You know, we want a talented group of people.
Reporting with photojournalist Stuart Hammer, Jalen Level, WDRB News.